It is the 3rd of December 2011. A Czech media outlet by the name of Euro.cz publishes archival documents of the STB from the Slovak National Memory Institute, according to which Andrej Babiš had been a confidant of the Communist secret police since 1980 and an agent as from November 1982. While working for Petromex, a foreign trade enterprise in Czechoslovakia, Babiš is alleged to have adopted the role of an economic informant for the STB, passing along details about trade deals, foreign companies, or contacts that could be useful to the regime. The news sparks national attention due to its historical significance and serves as a memory of the dark past in communist Czechoslovakia. The STB operated as the secret police force and intelligence apparatus from 1945 until the dissolution of the totalitarian regime in 1990. The government entity dealt with any activity that was considered hostile to the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia. The state security used coercive methods to achieve its objective, including conducting permanent surveillance, murder, torture, and incarceration of political opponents. Leading resistance figures such as Václav Havel, Petr Url, Ota Bedňarová, and Svatopluk Karasek were among those prosecuted or imprisoned for their resistance. Given the notorious reputation of the intelligence agency, the 2011 publication threatened to jeopardize Babiš's political aspirations with his recently formed populist movement called ANO. Babiš used the controversy as political capital, skillfully using the situation to present himself as unfairly targeted by the political establishment and media, boosting his populist appeal accordingly. In response to the publication, Babiš files a lawsuit in January 2012 in the Bratislava Regional Court against the Slovak National Memory Institute, alleging that he was wrongly listed as an STB agent and did not knowingly cooperate with the secret police. This follows a long chain of judicial and archival disputes that culminates with the Bratislava Regional Court in a renewed trial, dismissing Babiš's lawsuit on 13 February 2018. Despite this setback, Babiš continues his judicial pursuits against the Slovak Interior Ministry and manages to obtain a favorable settlement with the Bratislava District Court in October 2024. The ministry formally acknowledged that Babiš was wrongly listed as an STB agent and did not knowingly cooperate with the secret police. In return, Babiš agreed to drop all financial claims for damages. To this day, the allegations remain disputed and are a divisive subject among voters. At this point, let's examine parts of Babiš's narrative that don't align cleanly with what the archives and court documents, as reported, suggest. Firstly, Babiš has claimed that the secret police files, which revealed him as an agent under the codename Bureš, were falsified by intelligence officers. In other words, the agent profile was made up to be fictitious. The issue with that theory is that creating a false profile could be dangerous for the instigator. It could, if exposed, jeopardize the career of an STB officer with the prospect of dismissal and criminal prosecution. Furthermore, Babiš's alias as Agent Bureš appeared in 8 different files according to a source at the Slovak National Memory Institute. The latter stated the following: the individual internal checks of the Bureš volume by the STB at the time confirmed its credibility. The Bureš volume was also checked from a professional point of view by a superior authority, which also found no irregularities. The records were kept in accordance with the standards in force at the time. The collaborator Buresh was successively managed by 3 STB members, so sooner or later, a fictitious agent would have been discovered. Lastly, the Institute found a statistical card in the STB archive which indicated the following: Babish's personal data, his codename Buresh, a stamp marking him as an agent, and the names of STB officers who supposedly handled him. The data on the card wasn't standing alone. The same details appeared in different official records of the STB, including its registration protocol. If all this compelling evidence was brought forward in defense of the allegations, why did the Slovak Ministry of the Interior admit otherwise in October 2024? There is speculation that political alliances played a key role in their decision. Indeed, Babiš has close ties with prominent Slovak politicians, including Prime Minister Robert Fico and President Petr Pellegrini, whom he supported in the latest presidential election. Critics have raised concerns that political considerations may have influenced the settlement, but the theory still remains inconclusive. And yet, despite Babiš's dark past, he still manages to build a multi-sector business conglomerate, Agrofert, while also climbing to the highest ranks of Czech politics. In 2011, Babiš forms a new populist party called ANO, which builds its identity on fighting the establishment and corruption within Czech politics. Thus the name ANO, Akce nespokojených občanů, which translates as Action of Dissatisfied Citizens. The new party gains popularity very impressively among voters and finishes as the second largest party in the country after the latest Czech parliamentary elections held in October 2013, allowing ANO to join in a coalition government and giving Babiš the opportunity to gain access to political positions where he can wield significant influence for the benefit of his businesses. Babiš is nominated as Minister of Finance in January 2014 and is rapidly subject to allegations of holding multiple conflicts of interest. One of these allegations erupts in March 2015 when the Czech Ministry of Finance submits a proposal to extend tax reliefs on biofuels produced and sold in the country at a time when Babiš's Agrofert was one of the largest Czech biofuel producers. In the 2000s and early 2010s, the European Union set targets for countries to increase the use of renewable energy in transport. To meet those targets, the Czech government introduced tax breaks on the production and sale of biofuels, such as biodiesel or bioethanol. These fiscal reforms were financially beneficial to the largest producers of this energy source, including Agrofert. So where is the conflict of interest? Well, as mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Finance, which was headed by Babiš, was the body that made a proposition to Parliament to extend the tax relief program for biofuels until 2020. In other words, Babiš was accused of using his political position to push forward a legislative proposal which would be beneficial for his company. Noticing the conflict of interest, opposition MPs filed a non-confidence motion against the government. However, the government survived the motion, and in November 2015, the bill was approved by the lower house of parliament. Babiš pursued other controversial fiscal policies during his time as finance minister, such as proposing the implementation of electronic registration of sales, proposed reverse charging of VAT, and VAT control statement for companies. His political opponents claimed these policy proposals were a regulatory burden for small businesses while being harmless to Agrofert. Babish's time as Minister of Finance did not have a happy ending either. In May 2017, he was sacked from his role as Minister of Finance due to allegations of tax evasion as CEO of Agrofert. Despite a bitter end to his tenure as finance minister, Babiš bounced back into the political sphere and set his sights on becoming prime minister, an ambition which he carried out successfully in the 2017 Czech legislative elections. And yet, his rise to the top of Czech politics did not silence his critics. Just a couple of months after his election as prime minister, another controversy about Babiš was exposed, coming this time from someone very close to him. His very own son, Andrej Babiš Jr., claimed in multiple televised interviews that he had been forcibly taken to Crimea to prevent him from testifying in an investigation into charges that his father had illegally obtained 2 million euros in EU subsidies. This case was known as the Stork's Nest affair. To give you some important context, the EU has in place a regional development fund which provides special funding to businesses and organizations that create jobs, boost innovation, and strengthen local economies. Small and medium-sized enterprises in underdeveloped regions of the continent are the usual recipients of this type of subsidy. And yet, Čapí Hnízdo, a luxurious hotel and conference center near Prague, owned by multi-industry conglomerate Agrofert, received a 2 million euro subsidy from the program just described. Now you may be wondering, how did this happen? Let me explain. The luxury resort was under the ownership of Agrofert at the time of its development in 2006. Between 2007 and 2008, the ownership of the Stork's Nest project was transferred from Agrofert to Babiš's close family members through companies they controlled. This made the hotel appear to be a small, independent business project, qualifying it for special funding in the amount of 2 million euros. A few years later, ownership of the resort was quietly transferred back to Agrofert. Noticing the ownership changes were only a tactic to deliberately deceive the size of the business, the Czech authorities and EU Anti-Fraud Office began investigating the fraudulent nature of this scheme. After multiple police investigations and initial charges brought forward, state prosecutors officially indicted Babiš for fraud in March 2022. As of today, the Czech justice system is still yet to make a verdict on the matter. Once again, Babiš claimed that this allegation was another political maneuver used by the media and establishment to harm his reputation. The problem with that argument is that even Babiš's own son testified against him on this subject. Andrej Babiš Jr. was very close with his father and was also directly implicated in the chain of ownership transfers. Therefore, this case brings a lot of suspicion towards the fraudulent actions of the Slovak billionaire. If fraud wasn't the only accusation made towards Babiš regarding his inexhaustible portfolio of assets, then perhaps it is also worth discussing his secretive offshore accounts and transactions revealed by the Pandora Papers. For those not familiar with the Pandora Papers, the latter was a leak of millions of documents published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists as from 2021, which exposed the secret offshore accounts of political leaders and high-net-worth individuals. One of the many people involved in the publications was Babiš and his shady purchase of a castle in the French Riviera, known as Château Bigot. Let's make a deeper dive into the complex financial structure of this transaction. In 2009, Babiš made a 15 million euro loan to Blakey Finance Limited, a company owned by Babiš himself and domiciled in the British Virgin Islands, a territory known to be a secretive tax haven. The fund amount in the company was accordingly transferred to Boyne Holding LLC, another company owned by Babiš and based in Washington, D.C. The American company then moved the money to its subsidiary called SCP Bigot and domiciled in Monaco. Babiš used his Monegasque company to purchase Chateau Bigot, a luxury property in Mougins. This transaction raised some eyebrows for a number of reasons. Firstly, the series of transfers of wealth between multiple shell companies owned by Babiš could have served as a fiscal strategy to reduce his tax burden on capital gains. Secondly, such a structure was potentially used to hide any links of his ownership of the chateau, despite being obliged to disclose his assets as a political figure. Indeed, records obtained by Investigate.cz, the ICIJ's Czech partner, showed that neither the chateau nor the companies involved in its ownership appeared in asset declaration forms required of public officials under Czech law that Babiš had filed since entering politics in 2013. Lastly, and perhaps most disturbingly, the use of offshore companies in tax havens and secret loans could be red flags for money laundering. Babiš allegedly made use of this technique, particularly when he loaned 15 million euros to his company based in the British Virgin Islands. While these activities revealed by the Pandora Papers are suspicious, they remain difficult to prosecute. Czechia's National Center Against Organized Crime investigated this, but found no criminal offense committed in the country. The French National Financial Prosecutor's Office opened a preliminary investigation in February 2022 and is still ongoing. The complexity of proving clear intent to commit tax evasion or money laundering, combined with the difficulty of carrying out investigations in jurisdictions that are sometimes uncooperative, may explain why this case remains in a stalemate. In this video, we have discussed not only Babiš's dark past during communist times in Czechoslovakia, but also the main controversies that he has been at the center of during his career as a politician and entrepreneur. This discussion is even more crucial to have now, as at the time of recording this video, Babiš is set to return to power as Prime Minister after his party comfortably won the latest Czech parliamentary election in October 2025. This paradox raises a key question. Why is Babiš so popular among voters in the Czech Republic? What drives people to vote for a man who is allegedly a former communist agent, a corporate stooge, and a self-serving politician who is disliked even by his own son? One of the key forces that shape a positive image of the Slovak billionaire is his media empire. From his entry into politics in the early 2010s, Agrofert owned a number of newspapers and channels in the Czech Republic, including MF Dnes, Lidové noviny, Radio Impuls, and Metro. It is said that Babiš's corporate conglomerate at some point controlled a third of the media market in the country. Babiš used these media outlets to influence the coverage of his controversies. The poisoning of the Bečva River is a clear example of this maneuver. In 2020, a water stream in the Morava region of the Czech Republic was contaminated with toxic chemicals, which was discharged by DEZA, a chemical company owned by Agrofert. The wastewater wiped out all aquatic life along a 40-kilometer stretch of the Bečva River. The cause of this environmental hazard? A combination of human error and long-term neglect from Babiš's company. And yet, all the newspapers owned by Agrofert at the time virtually failed to mention DEZA's responsibility for the accident. Babiš also uses his media empire to portray himself as a political saint fighting against the establishment. On 5 September 2022, Dnes and Lidové Noviny, two newspapers owned by Agrofert, published simultaneously the exact same article explaining why people shouldn't trust the media. The front pages featured identical ads with images of Babiš peering inquiringly over his glasses with the caption, "Do you believe the media?" The article indicated that the mainstream media only tells part of the story, and that readers should instead tune into a show that Babiš hosts on his social media. This article was conveniently published in advance of the scheduled appearance by Babiš before the Prague Municipal Court in the case relating to the Stork's Nest affair. Regardless of criticisms, Babiš has demonstrated remarkable political resilience. For all his flaws as a shady businessman, corrupt politician, and toxic father figure, there's no denying that Babiš has a gift for understanding the power dynamics between politics, business, and the media. This three-of-a-kind combination is what led him to winning the latest Czech parliamentary elections again in comfortable fashion. His voters portray him as a misunderstood hero, an outsider with the courage and perseverance to stand up against the political establishment and media, in the spirit of David versus Goliath. Babiš has created a cult-like persona that causes his supporters to react with indifference to every negative allegation against him. It is a public relations masterclass. However, the influence and power that Babiš yields should not justify his political success. A lack of critical awareness exercised by so many voters in the country is perhaps the key reason why such a controversial figure got elected in the first place. Many people turn a blind eye to everything wrong with Andrej Babiš for purely subjective reasons, whether because of the positive image he portrays of himself, his entertaining persona, or even his funny Slovak accent. And while it may be difficult to judge the character of a person who is wearing a mask, sometimes all it takes is a bit of scraping beneath the surface to determine a person's true motives. If citizens commit to educating themselves about those they elect to govern, this could build the roots for a system that, in the words of Václav Havel, lives within the truth.